Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Peter, it sounds like you've got a lot of diversification in your rental portfolio. You own rental properties in a couple different states. It sounds like you've got a couple different strategies. What was your thinking behind doing that?
That way I don't basically have all my eggs in one basket. I like multiple properties, different property types in different areas, doing different strategies. So no matter how the market shifts, I've kind of, always got a leg up, no matter if it goes up or down, or, one segment of the market shifts in a way. That diversification helps me kind of stay on top of things once you average all the rentals out.
I think Peter has an interesting point. Most people buy rental properties in one area, but what happens if something happens to the local economy? It may be smart to diversify and own a property or two in a different area. Plus, if that area appreciates more, you may end up making more money and be able to capitalize on that appreciation. So on the show today, we're going to talk about what Peter's doing, where he's investing, and how things are working out for him. Joining us on the show today from Indianapolis is Peter Stewart. We'll take a quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Peter. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Peter, you were on the podcast about 5 years ago, and at that time you owned a 4-unit close to where you live, and then you also owned a property in California. Bring us up to speed. What does your portfolio look like today?
So I am going to be closing on my 10th door here in about 10 days. So now I have property in 4 different states. So I bought another duplex here in Indianapolis. I've got a short-term rental condo in Florida, closing on a second one again here shortly. And then I've got a cabin in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. The Florida and Tennessee properties are short-term rentals, and everything else are long-term rentals.
Congratulations. That's really awesome. I'd love hearing that. So when you were on the podcast before, you talked about that you were using a HELOC for your down payments. Are you still doing that today?
I haven't since, especially in the last year and a half, as rates have jumped up, because the HELOCs are usually a set rate plus a few points over prime or something like that. I don't remember the exact mechanics, but they're higher than your traditional conventional rates typically. However, I did utilize a HELOC when I bought the first Florida property. We did a vacation home loan, so those are a nice little tool to utilize if you like leverage. It's 10% down, and this has to be more than 60 miles away from your primary residence. So it's a great way to get into those vacation markets that we were already going to anyways. But it was like an 80-10-10 type of loan. So 80% was a conventional loan, 10% of it was a HELOC, and then I put down the other 10%. So we utilized HELOC in that sense. I paid it off after the rates jumped up. That payment went up quite a bit, so I did pay it off now. But we did utilize that in the beginning. And I've left the other HELOCs alone at this time again because the rates are just really high. And kind of shifted strategy a little bit there is where I am starting to like a lot of equity in my properties a bit more. I mean, technically, you look at it from a return on your equity, it's very low. That money's not necessarily working for me, but it allows me to ride out any potential market shifts. I'm not, if the market goes down 10%, I'm not underwater on any of these properties. So it helps me sleep at night a little bit. And I know that equity is there should I ever need to utilize it.
So it sounds like you're maybe shifting a little bit to where before you were really focused on growth, and now you're more shifting to maybe protecting what you have.
Definitely. It's still always have that growth mindset. I always want to acquire properties, but yeah, I did shift a little bit to more. I like having better properties and less of them. So higher end properties versus, I'd rather have $10 million homes than $150,000 houses or $200,000 houses, things like that. Also, strategy shifted as my brokerage business has grown. There's more income, so I can take more advantage of tax benefits, depreciation, things like that to offset that income. So that's sort of where that higher priced properties they come into play a bit, and the short term rentals as well, because there's some additional tax benefits you can take advantage of on those. So yeah, just as the market shifts, your buying strategy has to shift, and over time things change as well. So I never want to stay fixed or rigid. Always want to, the life changes, circumstances change. So you have to kind of, roll with the punches, so to speak, when needed.
Absolutely. So your down payments today are you're saving commission that you're earning from your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now let's talk about diversification and why you like having properties in different areas. And it sounds like it's more than just being in different areas. You're doing regular long-term rentals and also short-term. So tell me why that's important. In your head, what's the worst case that you're protecting yourself from?
Sure. So, take, some of these markets in the last year and a half that have dropped 40%, Austin, Texas, Boise, Idaho. If I had all my eggs in that basket and I bought if I bought 2 or 3 of these towards the peak and the market drops 40%, I'm underwater for quite a long time. That would make me very nervous. Now, my properties I tend to hold basically forever, unless I'm going to 1031 into something else potentially. But it's not short term. So, in one sense, these fluctuations in the market don't matter that much because eventually it'll probably get back there. But just again, for peace of mind, in case things changed, I know that I'm covered no matter what. And again, that's part of the diversification into these different markets. Spread out across the country, and not only, from a long-term and short-term perspective, because sometimes when things go down, other things go up. So, I just like kind of diversification in multiple different ways, and not just in terms of the states that I'm in, but in terms of the strategy I'm doing with those properties as well.
So talk to me about different strategies. So with some of your properties, they're in pretty expensive areas where it's, I would assume, harder for you to cash flow on those properties. So do you have different strategies for buying different properties?
Definitely. And that's where the short-term rental play comes in a lot, not only for the additional tax benefits when you're self-managing them, and I do self-manage 2 of them. I have a PM on another, but it allows you to generate more income so you can buy those nicer properties, and which typically a nicer property in a nicer area is going to be a more expensive property. And like I said before, I like the A-class areas and I like A-class assets as well. I don't need $100 a door. I'm not trying to, cash flow is great and all, but I make enough as being a real estate agent where I don't need a couple $100 a door for a property. Isn't really going to change my life. Whereas as an example, the Florida condo, because I self-managed it and took advantage of cost segregation study and that 100% bonus depreciation, that saved me $33,000 on my taxes that year. That's $33,000 out of pocket that I saved that would have gone to the government, stayed in my pocket, and that's way more than the cash flow I made on it. So, you can't do that with some of these other properties, and I'm not going to self-manage a long-term one, although it seems counterintuitive. It's, in my opinion, harder to manage a long-term rental from afar than it is a short-term rental.
That's interesting because I would think that a short-term rental would be harder because there's constant turnover and you're constantly communicating with new guests. But you're saying that it's actually easier to do that than to manage a long-term tenant.
Yeah, very, very counterintuitive. Here's a couple examples as to why. So there's a lot of tools out there that allow you to automate a lot of the process, and communication is one of the big pieces of the puzzle. So of course, you post on sites like Airbnb or Vrbo, that automates the booking process. Whereas a long-term rental, there's no automation there. I have to manually post on Zillow or manually post on apartments.com or Nextdoor, wherever you're posting. So you're manually doing all of that. Then you're fielding all the different inquiries that come in. Then you have to show those properties. I've seen some people do it from afar, and there are some ways to kind of do this, but with the vacation rentals or Airbnb stuff, the questions are the same. The process is the same for booking. Here's your check-in information. Here's your check-in time. Here's a guidebook. etc. So use we call it a channel manager. I personally use Hospitable, but there's multiple other ones. And that, again, it automates about 90% of the guest communication, including like follow-up and review capture, even review writing for the guests. It does all that for me. So that takes a lot off my plate. And there's other apps like I use Resort Cleaning that coordinates with my cleaners. So again, once a booking is done, it automatically notifies them. They confirm, I get a notification. All set and done. They're linked into my calendar, so I don't have to touch any of that stuff. I really only have to jump in when, there's a problem. I don't know, the dishwasher's not working or something like that. And you can hire, general maintenance people, or a lot of these cleaners will do, for initial fee, will do things like changing light bulbs and stuff like that. So a lot of the really like low level, easy maintenance can be done with your cleaners. So yeah, it makes it very, very easy to handle. I mean, there's some exceptions. Like I tried self-managing my cabin in Tennessee. That became a little problematic because I kept running into drunk people at 11 p.m. couldn't figure out how to work the hot tub. It's not that difficult, but I guess late at night after a couple drinks, it becomes difficult. So that and a few other reasons, I decided to hand it off to a PM. But overall, though, yes, it's very easy to do it from afar. And again, on the long-term rental side, when the toilet goes out, got to call a plumber. You don't have to worry about the cleanings, of course, but you're fielding all those calls directly. There's really no automation to do. So you've got to kind of carry 100% of the work burden versus where I can sort of pass that off in a sense to technology on the short-term rental side. So and I'm not showing the property or anything like
right.
There's no viewings, there's no move-in checklist, move-out checklist. There's none of that happens.
And there's nothing that has come up that's physically required you to be at the property. You've been able to outsource everything that could possibly be handled by you.
Yes. So like as an example, when I was self-managing in Tennessee, in the Pigeon Forge area, so that's a very vacation heavy rental market. So there's a lot of support vendors there for owners just like myself. And I was working with a company that they're basically like an a la carte sort of concierge to the owners who self-manage. So whatever you need, they can send someone to do. You want a gift basket sent to some client, or waiting on the kitchen table for them, they'll arrange it, drop it off. You need an electrician to come and fix a garbage disposal, they'll do that. Things like that. So that's not available in every market, don't get me wrong. Some of these sort of more obscure markets are not going to have that level of support, but any of the very vacation rental heavy markets, that's where you're going to find all the great cleaners that are geared specifically towards short-term rentals, and all the support staff like handymen and all those additional vendors there as well.
How did you decide where you were going to invest? Like, so you picked Florida, you picked Pigeon Forge. How did you decide that those were good areas?
So, I think, if you look up any, great places to buy an Airbnb, typically the Smokies are going to be at the top of the list because they get so, I think 12 million visitors a year, something like that. It's, substantially higher than the next place in America, which I believe is Yellowstone. I think, and they only have, 4 or 6 million, something like that. We have nearly double the amount of traffic that comes there. So it's not an area that's going anywhere. It's established. It's one of the most beautiful parts of the country, and it's also accessible. I think 60 or 66% of the country can get there within a day's drive. So just from a population standpoint, you've got millions and millions of people that are going to be able to go there very easily. So that was one part of it. What's a very established market? I didn't want to be the first person in an unknown market I wanted to go to a very established area. Also, from the Florida property, we vacation there anyway. So it just sort of made sense. Like, hey, we already come here all the time. We know it's a popular area. We know it's gorgeous. It's not going anywhere. So we might as well purchase a property here. We can use it when we come down here, save a little bit in that way, and then we'll rent it out, on the other times when we're not there.
I keep reading about that in Florida, the insurance rates are doubling and going crazy with all the hurricanes they've had. Has that affected you?
A little bit, but not too bad. So our properties are in Destin, so we're in the Panhandle. It has, some tornadoes or hurricanes have come through and hit Panama City, but a lot of the big nasty ones go through the middle of Florida, Orlando and kind of those areas, Miami and all that. So we have not, our insurance rates for the condo building we're in, yeah, they have gone up a bit, and there was a special assessment for that. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but those rates did go up a bit. The personal insurance, and we just have HO6 insurance since the condo has stayed steady since I've owned that property. And I think it's very reasonable given what I paid for it, looking at that rate versus like here in Indy, if I were to buy a house at that same price, I'd probably pay the same rate.
Okay.
So I have heard all those stories, of course. I think that's probably more affecting the single family homes. And there's some certain parts of Florida that are more affected than others.
Now, when you compare your long-term rentals in Indianapolis, like the income is so steady. And that's why I personally love long-term rentals, is that every month I know that income is going to come in. But with your vacation rentals, I imagine it's more seasonal, or you have times that are busier than others. Is that true, or do the properties rent year round?
Good question. It depends on the market you're in. So Destin is an example in Florida, very seasonal. So we're booked solid from starting in like mid-March. This year is actually beginning of March. We're nearly booked for the entire month, but usually like mid-March to about mid-October. Booked solid. Okay. And then it's dead for 5 months. And it seems scary at first, but when you historically are generating X income, and for almost 3 years now in a row, we've been hitting nearly the same numbers. Actually, it's going up a little bit. So you use that historical data and go, okay, I know if in the last couple of years I've made this, I'm doing the same things. It's not most likely not going to drastically change, at least in the negative, going forward. I mean, again, like Destin, it's a very established vacation rental market. It's not up and coming or anything like that. So it's not going anywhere. And again, once you know what income you're typically going to be producing, the down times don't really bother me, because when you average it out, it all works out. And you just have to be very careful. And I have separate bank accounts, of course, set up for these properties, and I don't touch the money when it's coming in, because I know that's going to bleed out a little bit during the dead months. There's other ways to supplement some income. If you can lower your rates and try to find snowbirds and things like that over the winter months. And there are some. It's not the most popular market for snowbirds because it's not super warm in the Panhandle, versus like a Miami. But nonetheless, it's better than what we've experienced in Indiana most of the time. And an area like Pigeon Forge, year round, it's booked year round, because it doesn't get too cold in the winter. And there's a lot of events. People are still doing all the outdoorsy, hiking and things like that, even when it's sort of cold there. So we've stayed booked year round. I mean, yes, we get some surge pricing, or whatever you want to call it, during the peak months, in June, July, August, September. But again, because there's so many events in an area like that year round, it's not really seasonal.
How about figuring out where you were going to buy? I mean, I imagine Destin and Pigeon Forge both have good areas, or some areas that are more desirable than other areas. How did you figure out where to buy?
So part of it's just doing some research and due diligence. Google's your best friend in terms of learning about those specific markets and kind of the hyper local information within them. Because Pigeon Forge, for example, the Smoky Mountain area, you've got 3 cities there: Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and Sevierville. Gatlinburg is at the base of the Smokies, or the entrance of the Smokies. Pigeon Forge sits basically to the north of it, and then Sevierville is north of that. So we're like, let's go right in the middle, because all 3 areas have plenty of attractions. Like this huge water park called Smoky Mountain is in Sevierville. Pigeon Forge has Dollywood. Gatlinburg has the Smokies. So let's be right in the middle. And there's also a parkway, they call it the Parkway, that runs, it's like the main artery right through all 3 cities. And we wanted to be very close to that, because you can get these cabins that are, 30 plus minutes way off the beaten path. And there absolutely is a market for that. But I think that's a smaller market than people who want to, be very local. I want to be able to get to the restaurants and coffee shop and whatnot, in 5 or 10 minutes. I don't want to be driving for 40 minutes each way when I, up a really steep, scary road every time I want to leave the cabin. So kind of a combination of those things led us to, number one, hone in on Pigeon Forge, and then sort of start looking at specific areas. And, look, price point can dictate it too. You're like, okay, I know I want a cabin. I don't want a condo. So there's certain areas for that. I want a community that's got some amenities. Like we have a nice swimming pool, because we weren't buying a property with a built-in one. And I wanted newer built. So I didn't want one of those old school, like log cabins. So then you start just filtering it down based on what you're looking for, price point, et cetera. And that narrowed it down to just a handful of communities. And then one popped up that we gravitated towards, so we pulled the trigger on it.
Did you go visit the properties before you made an offer?
No.
You did it all online, looking at pictures and
yeah.
Wow. Was that scary at all? I mean, because like you're investing in Indianapolis, it was easy to go look at those properties and see them. Like, was that nerve-wracking at all to not see the property?
Not so much for me. Just I'm so experienced, and I've been in real estate for over 15 years, so I know what to look for. I can just almost look at a property online and tell if it's good or not. I have that intuition at this point because I've seen so many thousands of properties, and I've been investing for over a decade as well. So I have a little bit of leg up on maybe the newer investor, but it's a great question because I get that all the time. About 98% of the investors I work with are not local here either. They're from all over the country or world. And 95% of those have never stepped foot in Indianapolis either. So they have that same apprehension. And obviously, connecting with an agent like myself that knows the area very well, invests here, and knows, really the hyper local, street by street kind of information, because I'm driving them and selling them all the time. That helps put their mind at ease a little bit. So same here again. That's why I said going with an agent that I really knows these areas and knows that specific market that I'm trying to get in. That puts me at ease a little bit. They're going to tell me, oh yeah, avoid this place, or oh, this is a great area to do it in, and so on. So overall, I mean, look, there's always a little bit of nerves, but wasn't too bad. Just based on the due diligence I had done, my intuition and knowledge from that agent, kind of combining those together made me pretty comfortable with it.
It's really interesting how investing out of state has become so much easier over the last couple of years. If you want to hear from an investor that's buying regular long-term rentals out of state, check out the interview I did about a month ago with Joe Facenda. It's episode number 456, and he's built his entire portfolio of regular long-term rentals. He's bought everything online. It's been super easy, and it's working out great for him. So check that one out if you haven't heard it already, number 456. And if anyone is interested in investing in Indianapolis, Peter is a realtor out there. He works with a lot of different investors, and he would be happy to connect with you. I've got his information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 461. If Peter inspired you and you're ready to buy your first property, or you want to add to your portfolio, reach out to Chaley Ridge. She's a nationwide lender. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something that'll work for you in your situation. If you want to find out more, or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, you can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. I'll be back with a new interview next Tuesday. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.